Okay, looks like we're live and ready to go. Okay, no one's viewing yet.
Okay, we're fine.
We're up. Excellent. Still says 0 viewers.
There's
30 people waiting? Okay. No, 7 viewers. Here we go. We've got people appearing. We've got a little counter at the bottom of the screen that tells us when you start showing up. There we go. Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to this third in a series that I've done of webinars from the Local Government Association in association with the Open Data Institute where I am this morning. So it's going to be based on the e-learning module which is about making the case for data, and I'm going to be supported today by Emily. This is Emily from the Open Data Institute. Say hello, Emily.
Hiya.
And if you don't know me, I'm Lucy Knight. I work for Devon County Council. That's my day job. I'm also an ODI registered trainer and universally acknowledged I'm a bit weird about data. So this is why this is me delivering this to you, and hopefully it will be useful. Just want to check before we fully get started if people can see and hear okay. So can you pop a comment?
We've got comments in already.
Oh, okay.
You can see and hear.
You lot are on the ball this morning. Well, fantastic. That's good. Right then. So the structure is we'll spend about 20 minutes going through the e-learning module, and I will share my screen so you can see that. I'll try not to scroll up and down too much. Apparently that makes people seasick, so we won't do a lot of that. About 20 minutes on that, about roughly 40 minutes for questions and discussion. We will be finishing a bit early because there's going to be a minute's silence for the victims of Saturday's attack at 11 AM. So we'll wrap up at about 5 to 11 so everybody can observe that. Ask a question at any time, literally pop a comment in the right hand side there. You've got a chat box on if you're watching on YouTube. If you've got Knowledge Hub open, you can pop a comment or a question in there. If neither of those methods are working for you, you can also email us here at training@theodi.org. Emily will be monitoring that inbox. So if you have any questions to say the other methods aren't working, just pop it in an email. Also, if you have any feedback at all about the webinar, comments, complaints, things we could do better, the LGA would love to hear from you. And the email address for that is this one here, transparency@local.gov.uk. And if you haven't got the module open in front of you and you'd like to take a look, the full set of e-learning modules are here, lga.learndata.info. So we'll leave this behind us so that you can see all those links and addresses if you need them. Got quite a few people logged in and ready. Are there any questions to cover before we get started?
I think you've covered the basics.
Have
Let's
I?
just get started.
All right, housekeeping taken care of, fantastic.
And if you do have any comments or questions, please do feel free to put them in at any time.
Righty-ho. Right, so remind me, where's the button I need to press to share this screen? It's there,
The
isn't
green
it?
one.
The green one. This happens every time. There we go. Right, so I'm just going to change tabs and we'll look at the e-learning module, which hopefully in a moment will pop up for you. Okay, so here we go. So the module is called Making the Case for Data. And this, although the modules we presented, sorry about that, so far have been specifically around open data. If you know me at all, if you've ever talked to me, you'll know that I talk about all data, whether it's internal, better sharing, better working with data, as well as what we publish and share and put out in the hope that other people will do useful things with it. And this is very much about that. It's not just about open data. This is about just making better use of the data within your organization. Sharing is hard sometimes, and getting the right sort of insight in time to do something with can be very complex. It can be difficult, whether in a large authority or a small one, whether you've got fantastic infrastructure or your sort of nuts and bolts and spreadsheets. These things can be difficult, and data is not everybody's thing. So if you're trying to make some sort of case for something, if you've got a proposal, it needs to be compelling, it needs to be plain English, and sometimes it needs to be concise, because although proposals and option papers have got their place, obviously there are processes to go through. Conversations can pave the way for a paper going to the right committee or board or meeting or whatever the case may be, and actually getting some progress on the thing you're trying to get done. So, and as I always say, it's about people, and it's about relationships and networks, and convincing people that the thing that you need to do is going to be beneficial and useful and not too risky, depending on how risk averse your audience is. So there are various sort of examples of things you might want to get done. It might be about sharing data internally. It might be about getting your hands on a specific data set to do something with. It might be about setting up a full bells and whistles data warehouse. It might be publishing a specific data set that people have been a bit wary of in the past. It might be setting up full-on data portal. It could be this whole range of things you could be doing better with data. So I'm just going to wrap them all up together in a kind of a let's do better with data kind of pitch. And this particular module is about making sure that that pitch is really, really effective. Making the case and telling people what the benefits are of the thing that you want to do, some reassurance if they're concerned that it might not work, or there might be risks that they're not comfortable with, and the next actions, what's needed to make it happen. You can see in the module here we've got it's going to explain how to structure the pitch, identify the different audiences that you might want to be talking to, and how to tailor that pitch so that those people hear what they need to hear to be reassured and ready to give their support. So scrolling down to that first section, so the 5 components of the perfect data pitch, and I'm just going to go through those each one in turn quite quickly. This is based on this thing called an elevator pitch, which if you've set up a new business and you've had any kind of coaching or advice, somebody would have said, oh, you know, you need your elevator pitch. And the theory behind this, if you're not familiar with it, is that at some point you might find yourself getting into a lift with an important person, somebody who might have funding or influence and can help your business get off the ground. And the idea is you probably have about 90 seconds to introduce yourself, tell this person about what you do and convince them to give you their support. Now, where I work at Devon, we don't bump into people in the lift as much as we suddenly bump into people in corridors. So I always call this the corridor pitch. The public sector version is the corridor pitch. You step out of your office, the chief exec or some important person is walking by and you say, oh, hello, good morning. He says, how are things going? And you have 90 seconds before he turns off into another room or meeting to make your case. So the corridor pitch. And it goes a bit like this. You must state what it is that you're trying to fix. What's the problem you're actually trying to solve? So the very first thing is actually what's that pain point? And then you have what is your solution? What is it going to do? Actually, what is the benefit? What's going to be better when you're done with that? It helps, the third point is it helps to have a specific example where someone else has done this or something like this. You can say, well, you know, that other authority did it and they saw these benefits, they saved this much money or they saved this much in resources. Something quite concrete that you can refer to and say, there is proof that this is a good thing to do. The fourth point is, why is this the best thing to do? Because there's a certain amount of inertia in the public sector, there's a certain amount of, you know, we don't really want to start anything new or we don't want to put resource into that at the moment, or we simply don't have any spare resource to put. So why is doing nothing not an option? Why is doing something cheaper or smaller scale not an option? Why is this other solution that they've read about in Modern Gov not an option? You need to be ready to make that argument. And again, briefly, it's got to be concise. And finally, and this is critical, is for this pitch, there has to be a next action, something that they can sign up to literally on the spot, whether that's, yes, send me your proposal and I'll read it, or yes, I'll raise that at the next delivery board meeting or committee, or yes, we'll get some people in a room and talk through the options. Something they can say yes to, so that you've made progress, even though you've only had that 90 seconds. So before I look at those in more detail, any questions so far? No, nothing coming up. I'm allowing for, there's a little bit of a lag between me speaking and you guys hearing, so I'm just checking that nothing's going to sort of pop up just as I get started again. No, okay, right, I will move on. Again, do weigh in with questions and comments at any time. That's not a problem, I'll stop and answer them. So the first point that your pitch has to contain, what problem are you solving? You've got to be looking at taking some pain away. It's good to say, oh, I want to improve some area of the work that I'm doing, but really it's a lot more compelling if you can say there is this problem and my solution, my proposal can make that pain go away. Around data, my experience has been this breaks down into things like, at the moment it takes too long to find information. which specifically can be an issue if you're trying to respond to freedom of information requests or complaints, or simply if a crisis arises and somebody needs figures very, very quickly on what is going on, what's brought us to this point. So it takes too long to find data. We can't respond to the public or to statutory requests or sudden requests for more information. Budgets can be hard to control if we're not totally sure what's going on. Again, my experience is the money tends to be very well tracked, but that data can be a little incomprehensible to you if you're not a finance person. So that's an issue. Reporting can be using data that's 3 months, 6 months old, simply because it takes that long to tidy up, to standardize, to clean up specific data sets. And that sometimes is just not good enough, especially, as I say, if a crisis is happening. And lastly, and I think this one does matter, that you have a poor reputation. Sometimes if we're not managing our data well, or if we're not putting out particular data sets, because we just don't appear to be accountable, this perception that we're hiding something, or our decisions aren't backed up by data. We can't point at the information and say, this is why we're doing this particular thing, this is why we've taken this particular policy path or strategy path. If we can't back that up with data, we look at best incompetent, at worst malicious, and that's reputationally very poor. Plus, it just makes me uncomfortable not to have an evidence base. So those are some examples of the problems you could be looking at solving. And I imagine if you're thinking about this, if you're watching this morning, that you have something in mind already. You know what the problem is. Articulate that in clear, plain English. Make it absolutely clear that your proposal is something that's going to tackle that. So that's that first point. And in here, the recommendations have a list of 3. So if you can boil that down into friends, Romans and countrymen sort of format, that can be very useful. It's a good oratorical trick. So the next thing, what's the benefit? So you've said what the problem is. So what is your proposal, your option going to do? How's it going to make things better? And this is the bit that ought to be tailored to the person that you're talking to. And chief exec in Devon is always happy to hear about options that will just generally make things better, and he doesn't usually need to be convinced that it's something that specifically will make his life easier. He understands he's got that strategic picture of the whole organisation. But if you're talking to somebody different, they have their own set of problems, their own operational or strategic priorities that they need to be thinking about. So how is your proposal going to help them change their life and make it better? And we've got a range here. You can expand these and look at the different options. I'll leave that for you to do. As I say, it makes people seasick if I just go up and down every single thing on the screen. But looking very quickly, policy developers, and that might be a policy team, organisational development, or that might be elected members. And they're looking at good, solid policy and strategy. They're looking at where do they need to focus attention, where do they need to prioritise resources, how do they tackle what are perceived to be the authority's greatest challenges. So if your proposal is something that can help with that, make that clear. This will tell us where the people most in need of preventative services are, so we can save money 5 years, 10 years down the line, and we can stop people coming back into the system. It's that sort of thing that they're going to need to hear about. Something broadly similar for if you're talking specifically to a head of service who's looking at delivering what it is that the customer actually needs and making sure people don't come into, say, social care or adoption fostering, the people services basically, when they could have been helped earlier down the line. So it's about identifying the unmet need and making sure that people get help and the services that they need when they actually need it. Good data management obviously will make a difference there. So that's a benefit to talk about with that sort of group. If you're talking to performance managers and business analysts, as there are on this list, well, they probably don't need convincing of why better data management and better data use is a good thing, but obviously some of the benefits that come from, say, setting up a really efficient data warehouse system will be better quality data, which is a no-brainer. Of course, they're going to want that. Faster reporting, so more responsive reporting to crises, to ad hoc queries, which is going to make them and their team look good, always good. Accurate metrics, so we're not sort of chasing our tails saying, well, is that absolutely correct? 6 months down the line, we found out we're a few percent out. That's never good. And real-time information, which is sort of distant dream, I think, for a lot of us, but it's achievable if we begin to get our data in order. So that's for the audience who understands data, who understands performance and analysis. Communications and PR, for me personally, and again, because I'm a bit weird about data, communicating and having our data in better order and being more accountable, to me, is a good news story all by itself. And this is something that we like to think we're getting right at Devon, is that we are approachable and we are accountable around our data, and that we communicate, we talk, we have conversations with people. But also any story that is a good news story, if it's backed up by data, you can say we have the evidence that this is actually happening. We did a good thing, and here's the information that proves it. It makes that story much stronger. So for a comms and PR audience, that's the argument about the benefits. And frontline staff, at the bottom here, having the right information to hand means that staff can support the people they're working with better. They can make sure they get the right service, the right level of service. They can make sure that they get the information that they need, or if information isn't available, they're able to say so. They're never stuck in that position where they say, I simply don't know and I can't help you. Because people who work on the front line there with some of our most vulnerable residents, they care about what they do, and they do not like having to turn people away simply because the information is not there. So if you're in a position to be talking to frontline staff, then that is one of the benefits that you can be talking to them about. And when I was doing my preparation for this, I had to think about some other possible audiences. Now HR, and then if you've seen the prior webinars, you know I've talked about what we've done with HR metrics and making a public-facing dashboard with some of the common data that people ask us for, which is also very useful for an internal audience. HR professionals want to be able to respond quickly and accurately to questions. So although there is a certain amount of business as usual with this is how many staff we have and this is the turnover rate, and you know these are the pay this is the pay structure and the grading structure and so on and so forth, they do also get a lot of ad hoc queries about, you know, what do I need to do about recruitment? What am I facing in terms of all of my most experienced staff retiring in the next 5 years? And this is an issue, say, with social work. We've got a lot of people that are coming up to that age where they might be thinking about retirement. We may lose a lot of very qualified, very skilled people all in one go. HR would like to be able to help prepare for that sort of thing. They don't want to be constantly firefighting. They would like to be ready. So if you're talking to HR at all, that is a definite benefit of having a better grip on your internal staff data. We've got information governance, who are a potential audience. In Devon, information governance are part of sort of general customer feedback and information security management, and they take care of all the FOIs. FOI is a massive burden. I think in every authority it's problematic. So knowing who's got what information, so better data management internally, is definitely going to be a winning argument with information governance, but also being able to keep track of where the sensitive information is and who's responsible for it, what access levels, what security is placed around it. That is going to be something that they're very, very interested in. Moving on to ICT as an audience, if we're talking to IT, help desk support, customer support around tech, then better data management means fewer duplicate data sets, which means we're cutting out a lot of redundant storage, better balancing of server activity and loading. And this, I think, would have them sort of kicking up the hills and cheering in the hallways. No more access databases. If we had our data in good order, better data management, one version of the truth, good data warehouse, whatever the case may be, we can start to cut out all those sort of little orphan spreadsheets, those incredibly complicated ones with all the macros in, and the access databases that people have to build because the system they work with isn't actually doing the job that they need. So definitely a winning argument there. And finally, just thinking about procurement and or finance, better data management means we know where the money's going. We know how people are performing on different contracts. We know that we are spending money in the right places and it's effective. Good finance data management means you can marry up that with looking at performance of specific services and say, yes, the money's being well spent. And again, we get some criticism perhaps for spending in particular places or with particular companies and not necessarily achieving the results people think we should be. It would be good to be able to tie that data together and say, right, this is what is actually going on there. So that's a little bit about tailoring the benefits to the people that you're talking to. Just checking in case there are questions in.
We've just got a comment from Alex Goddard, who, as a scrutiny officer himself, would encourage tapping up with security committees on the journey. Scrutiny relies on data, so share with them and you might get political backing to take it forward.
Oh yes, very good point. Thank you, Alex. Yes, very true. And I did mention very quickly sort of elected members, but yes, your scrutiny committees, depending on how they're structured in your authority, are going to have a strong interest in having good data in front of them, and will, if you coach them, will request better data, more timely data, so that they can do their job. Basically, is what they're put on the committee for, is to oversee what's going on and flag up any issues. So yes, that's an excellent point. Thank you.
Question from Tim. We were all preparing for GDPR with many new audit trails, docs to prepare, etc. So this is capturing managers' interest. Is this an opportunity to drive forward more support for data in organisations?
Oh yeah.
I guess, how would you capitalise on that?
Oh, with every fibre of my being would be the answer to that last bit. Yes, no, absolutely. We are going to have to get better at all of this, and GDPR is a golden opportunity, as Tim says. I don't think I even need to go into detail on that one. That is absolutely a thing that, and especially I think that's going to be quite compelling for the information governance team, who will absolutely be in favour of, at the very least, having a good data asset register, is what I'm calling the data version of the old information asset register. Where is everything? And what state is it in? And who's allowed to look at it? And what have we done about making sure people are informed about what we might be doing with that data in the past, and do we need to clear that up? We simply don't know enough about that, I think. And yeah, and this is going to be what we need to start focusing on. Okay, excellent. Right. So the next point.
Oh, sorry, another question.
Another one?
Sorry. Actually, this is quite long. Maybe carry on, and I will.
We'll come back to that.
Sure
There's one about how do we define their problem, so I will come back to that one. That looks good. So the next point that your pitch has got to include is some example of where better use of data has helped in another authority. It doesn't have to be a public sector example, but it can help. Sometimes people will push back and say, oh yes, but that was a private company and we don't work that way, or oh yes, but that was a unitary and we're a county or a district and we don't work that way, etc., etc. Now there are some examples in the eLearning module, which again I will leave it to you guys to go through, because I don't want to just be scrolling through and reading out what's on the screen. You can do that for yourselves. But I'm going to take this opportunity to just bang the drum as usual for get out of the building and talk to people, talk to your networks and find people who work in a similar environment to you, in a similar structure or authority, and say, have you come across this problem? And what solutions did you come up with? And so Local Government Association can help put you in touch with people. I think there are various topical groups on Knowledge Hub. And of course there is Local Gov Digital. There's a network of local gov people who do tech and data and digital stuff. Who will be more than happy to spread the word if you have a specific question. And then things like Local Gov Camp, which is an unconference for local gov people, and Open Data Camp, which is an unconference for anybody who likes open data. And those are good opportunities to talk to people and say, I have this particular issue, how has somebody else approached this, and can you talk to me about how that worked, and any pitfalls, and what benefits did you see, and what improvements did you see? So that's very much about find an example that is as relevant as it can possibly be, because anything that doesn't quite marry up with the way you do things where you are is going to get that pushback. Oh, that's a nice example, but it doesn't, we don't work like that, or we're not structured like that. Find examples that fit with the way you are. Right, so the next point is, why is your idea the right idea? Because you may get some pushback, like I said, about, oh, can we leave that a year? Is it okay if we just don't do anything about that just at the moment? Or is it okay if we go out to a sort of competitive tender and choose the cheapest option? Or is it all right if we just fudge it with some existing tool and worry about the full thing you want to do later? So you need a solid argument as to why this is the best thing to do. You should already know this, if this is something that you have in mind. So as an example, if you're talking about you want to get an open data portal, say, you need to be able to say, no, this is the best way to do this. And you need to be able to say this quickly. Remember, you've got 90 seconds for all of this. So to say doing nothing is not an option because we simply don't have the skills to be putting data out in, say, GitHub, which I always bring up, and Tim from LGA always tells me off for because not everybody knows what that is. So some of these things you need to be a techie for. If you want free options, you need to be quite technical, or you need to be able to tap somebody who is. So if you want to set up a data portal, because that just makes it easier for all staff to upload and share and publish appropriate data sets, then you need to say, we don't have the techie people who can do this stuff for free. We need a product, we need a service that will let us do this. If we do something else, if we go for a cheap option or a sort of halfway house option, we'll just have to spend that money in a year or 2 years' time. So this is the best option right now, because if we do this, there are some compelling reason why we should do it now. There's a special offer. I've just found this product which is ridiculously cheap as an introductory thing, and it can't hurt to try it. It's that sort of, this is definitely the best thing to do right now, and I can prove it in 5 words or less because I've done my research and I know that this is the best thing to do. Right, and the final point is the what next. What is the next action? And like I said at the beginning, when I was sort of outlining these main points that you have to have, it's got to be something that a person can literally commit to on the spot. So it's not going to be, give me £50,000 out of your budget, because no one's going to commit to that there and there in the corridor. But something like, can we set up a meeting with a couple of your data people so I can talk about, you know, what I want to do? Can I talk to whoever's in charge of the infrastructure so we can see if it's feasible to do this data warehouse thing? Or can we get information governance and finance and a couple of other people in the room so that we can talk about having a facility to get people together to work on specific data problems? Whatever the thing is that you want to move forward on, got to be very clear about what's the next action from the person you're talking to. And this has got to be tailored to them. You wouldn't ask the chief executive for to set up a meeting with finance. You'd be talking to the finance director about that. So it's who are you talking to and what's the next thing they can do for you to push this forward. And you've got to be quite clear about the expectations as well. If you make it too woolly, then people are going to be hesitant to sign up. Well, I'm not sure what I've just committed myself to, so I'm just going to say no until I have more information. So it's got to be something that they can say sort of a loud, clear yes to, or a loud, clear no, and here is why. Because sometimes people are going to say, look, I'm sorry, I can't help with that. I'm not sure that's the way forward, but actually, I think you should talk to, you know, and then we have some other person you want to talk to, or some other information that you might want to look at. But if you've got your pitch right, the person you're talking to will be engaged with the problem that you've put forward, the solution that you are proposing, and how to move it forward. So, and again, you can expand all these, but I'll leave that. I'm not going to just read these out to you. I'll leave that for you to look at in your own time. As you go down the module, there are sort of quick questions for testing that you've understood and absorbed all the information. Again, I'm not going to take you through those. I'm going to cancel the screen share. We can go back to looking at me and Emily, which is wonderful. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Emily. Emily, press the button for me. And deal with, so we had that question that we were going to come back to, didn't we?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you get problems defined in the first place by people who don't understand the role data can play in solving that problem? So for example, so this is from Danica. Danica and her fellow data people know that they have a wealth of data and the potential to solve issues by tapping into that wealth of data. The link between them and strategic leaders is weak. So they don't hear the problems so we don't hear the problems they're trying to solve to know whether data could help or not help. How do you go about bridging that gap, especially if it looks like there's more junior people trying to get too big for their boots and trying to change the way that things are done?
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, that's a whole bunch of things to tackle. So it can be tricky. You are immersed in the data. You totally understand what can and can't be done with it, you understand all the context around it, but in some authorities it can be tricky to raise your hand and say, I think I can help here, without going through specific channels. And I've been in this situation where people have said, you know, really you should have run that past me before you talk to so-and-so, which I'm not very good with hierarchies, so it didn't really take. But not everybody is, I think, feels necessarily that they have the backup to take that quite bolshy approach. So there is something about taking that to your command structure, if they are people that you feel you can trust to support you with this, and say, I think I could help more if I understood the strategic problems. So can I get into, you know, can I take an hour and go sit at, and observe one of the scrutiny committee's meeting, for example? That was something that was very helpful to me. That I would send a report, but I was never totally happy that it was meeting the need of the people who were looking at it. So I would go and sit in the back. I wouldn't speak. I had nothing to say. I wasn't on the agenda, and I wasn't, you know, an invited guest. But our scrutiny meetings are mostly webcast, and they're open, so anyone can go sit in there. And I would sit in the back with my copy of the report, and I would just annotate it really quickly. Whenever somebody said, well, you know, I don't understand that number, or what's this supposed to be telling me, or do we have last year's data to compare it with, would make a quick note, and then go back and look at the data and say, well, I think we could do that better next time. And one of the, this is not an instant solution, but one of the benefits of that was, over time, scrutiny committee got to know my face. You know, there's that girl who sits in the back and always is paying attention. It's a bit creepy. Let's ask her what she's up to. And got to the point where it was me taking that report. Again, I wasn't required to speak, but I was physically the person in the room if there were any questions, and had that opportunity to say to those elected members, is this report meeting your needs? Is there more information that you could do with? Because actually we have some issues with our data currency and its structure and its quality. But if you tell me what would make a difference for you, then I can focus on that. And got some support then for, and that was specifically around better presentation rather than improving the data itself. But giving them better presentation of the data made the case very clearly that actually the data is quite poor and we need to work on that next. And so built up some support there. They're also, and again, it depends on specifically the decision makers in your organisation. Some of those people are a lot more approachable than you would think given their seniority. So in our case, cabinet member who is in charge of digital and transformation absolutely loves just wandering the halls and having conversations with the people he perceives to be working on the agenda, which is his focus. So he's very, very approachable, loves to have a quick chat, you know, in the queue in the shop or whatever. Not everybody has that. But it's this thing about networking. If you are quite junior, please don't feel that means you're not allowed to talk to people. You absolutely are. But start to build an understanding of the business issues, the business problems that people are facing, and the strategy problems that people are facing by talking to people that you're not going to get into trouble for talking to, and work your way through making friends as you go until you are talking to people with that bit more influence. Eventually you will hear the stuff that you've been saying being repeated back by very, very important people, and you will know you're making a difference. You'll hear a phrase and you're like, yeah, I said that 6 months ago. So you will get there. But where it is, there we go. It's about people. It's always about people. There are no magic answers. You have to make friends. You have to use what influence you have, and you have to be clear that you understand what you're talking about, that you have good knowledge of the technical space, the data space, but also that you have some empathy for the actual issues that people are facing, that the current structure, infrastructure, or data quality is not solving. As you begin to have those networks, people will come to you when they have a problem. They will ask you what you think might be done. Just as this has been the case for me, and I hope it will be the same experience for you. Is that more or less an answer?
I think so.
Okay, good.
Let us know
Follow, if that was total rubbish and it didn't answer your question, come back and let me know and I'll have another go.
So which of the groups that we talked about do you think need convincing either the most or the most regularly?
Oh, okay, right. So I've got post-its for each group. I run on post-its basically. Who needs the most convincing? Yeah. I would say there is no one group that needs more convincing. There are just people who have different requirements. People that you need to check in with most regularly tend to be the people who are asked to make a lot of big decisions on a regular basis. So your chief executive, your leader of the council, your cabinet members, your elected members, and service directors who are constantly being given strategic decisions to make will need reminding that they talk to you and that you have this case and you have this proposal, and will need reminding that actually it fits into this agenda that they're currently working on, because you can't keep track of absolutely everything. So that's my opinion, and it may vary in your authority, but if you're looking at people who are always on the go and they're always in meetings and they always have stacks of paperwork to read, it is very easy to lose track of, oh, there was that thing that I said I would do. So be constantly not nagging, but make sure people remember that you exist and that you spoke about these things.
Do you have any war stories of your own with any extra tips or anything people can learn from?
Oh my goodness. Yes, mentally editing to see what I can actually share. So I have had experiences where I have been told that I didn't have enough stripes on my arm, and that was the actual phrase used, to go into a particular meeting or to talk to a particular person. And I kept going because I am that awkward. Again, not everybody feels secure and safe enough in their environment to be that difficult. But if you do it, because in a healthy organization, in a healthy environment, if you're the person who knows what they're talking about and that question comes up, then you're the person that should be in the room. I have been told that I wasn't important enough to be in a meeting by the person I was actually meeting, that they were very disappointed not to see my boss or my boss's boss. Well, I just basically continued because I was the right person to be in the room. Told them I was sorry that they felt that way, but I hope that the meeting will go well. In terms of trying to get stuff done and the sort of the slog to get stuff done, I don't see this as war, because where it is, there it is. It's about people. I get paid to make friends. This is awesome. This is the most awesome thing. I get paid. My job is to understand what's going on for people, to understand what problems they're facing, and to identify how better use of data is going to make people's lives or work easier, or is going to improve a service, or is going to save money, or is going to streamline the use of resources. So it doesn't feel like war. And if people are difficult, if people are antagonistic, if people are actively blocking, then they have some reason for doing that. It's not because they're bad people. It's not because they're evil. It is because for some reason what you're trying to do is problematic for them. And it is important to understand that. So my biggest issue over the years has been learning to understand that people have really, really good reasons for doing what appear to be totally stupid and incomprehensible things that are getting in my way, and to have more empathy for the situations that people are in. This is why I always talk about conversations and networks and friendships and getting out more and talking to people, because it's going to make all the difference. And if I've learned nothing else over the years, then that is it. That's the most important thing. Okay.
Question from Simon. Do you ever find that managers want too much data, that they lose sight of core trends or get lost under the sheer weight of information available? And assuming that's a yes, how do you overcome this?
Yes, indeed. And we see this, and I hear this from my colleagues who are directly working within services in performance management, that managers, especially if there's some sort of a crisis or they're under stress, they respond by saying, give me all the data. They're not comfortable with, they're not comfortable that what they're being given meets the need, that tells them what it is they need to know. They are very concerned about missing something, and they demand more data, more detail, more raw data, everything you have, literally everything you have, give me everything. And then they spread everything out in front of them and they pour over it, frantically trying to make sense of what's going on. And that's not helpful, because that doesn't actually work. They feel like if they have everything in their hands, then no one can accuse them of being uninformed. But data is not the same as information. It's not the same as knowledge, and it's not the same as insight. And sometimes dealing with that means basically saying, look, it doesn't feel like we, and it's an inclusive we, we're not accusing people of not getting a grip on their data. We don't properly have the insight that we need around this, and it feels like we should maybe be looking differently at this data and what can we do. And to support that person, and this is almost a corridor pitch in its own right, to say, look, the problem is that we've got more and more data, but we don't seem to have a handle on what's happening. So my proposal is that we sit back and we take a couple of hours just to say, what do we need to know? What question do we need to answer right now? And we use that time to identify the questions, then to identify the data or the information that's going to answer those questions. And then we will go and find that data and we'll bring it to you. And this is better because doing nothing, current scenario, you're swamped, we feel like we're not helping, and frankly, it's not sustainable, everybody's stressed. This has worked before, you see, refer it back to, I've done this for another service, they're much happier now because the questions are identified, they know what it is they need to know, we know what data we need to provide. So that is a scenario we have to reassure people, because people don't respond like that. People don't demand all the data unless they are really, really, really concerned about missing something small, if they don't pay attention to everything. So that is an opportunity to support and reassure that person and say, I have a process, I have a mechanism that will help. Please let me help you. I think I can do this. I've done it before. I've done it for this other service. And this is an effective way to take a step back and get a grip. Does that help?
Hopefully. So we have a request to tell us how you've secured senior buy-in to all the innovative data projects you've done down in Devon. Do you think it's easier to do extra/new things and do partner organisations help with that?
Okay.
That is 3 questions.
That's 3 questions
in one,
but that's cheating. But okay. How have I secured senior buy-in? By prototyping. By saying, I want to do something different with data, and the data is not necessarily in a fit state, or if it is, it needs a bit of work, but if I can make some changes, then this is what I would be able to give you. And prototype, and I think I talked about this in previous webinars and in talks that I give quite regularly, even if it's just a sketch on the back of an envelope. So if I had the data, or if I had access to this particular data set that at the moment I can't get, I could give you this and it would look like this and it would do this for you, and I believe that would help, and I think that would solve the problem that you're facing. So securing buy-in is very much about, what problem can I solve for you? I want this so that I can do this thing. Does this thing help you? And bringing solutions, saying I've identified a problem and this is the thing I think will fix it, but having a good, clear example of how that's actually going to work. So that's question 1. The other way that we progress those things, and a couple of my colleagues there get a mention by name, so Pip Tucker, who was our senior manager in strategic intelligence, now works at Somerset, and Mark Painter, who's my fellow data guru at Devon. We progress stuff by making sure that the first couple of iterations are basically free at the point of delivery. We use cheap and free and open source tools to tinker and to play and to come up with something, which is our prototype. So we don't pull resources in any big way until we have built a little something to prove to ourselves that it'll work. When we've got that proof of concept, we say, well, we think we could do some more with this. And because we've got something that demonstrates both the presentation, sort of better communication of what the data says, and the functionality, that's good to convince both a policy audience and a technical audience that yes, this is a thing that actually is viable. So we very much tend to tinker, to prototype, to iterate. We don't stop and ask for permission very much. We don't ask for permission at all. We have a lot of, we have some autonomy. We've built up a lot of trust over the years, so that's good. If we don't ask for forgiveness either, if it doesn't work, then we've wasted nothing but a bit of our time, and we just quietly bin it and move on and do the next thing. So there is something about having that space, that technical sandbox space, permission to tinker, the emotional space, the feeling safe to try stuff, that helps to push things along and to very quickly test what works, what doesn't, and that sort of fail fast, fail cheap environment that we're very lucky to have. What's the next part of the question?
Is it getting easier to do extra new things?
It is. It is. The time that we've put in making friends, understanding the problems that other departments and teams face has made it very much easier now, specifically so good links with information government, good links with ICT and finance, and conversations with social care, education, and sort of very much people-facing services means that we now have those relationships where we can go to people and say, I would like to try something new. Please may I have access to your system, whether that's a training database, whether that's anonymized data, whether that's literally just training data and it doesn't relate to real people, or can I please have access to the finance reporting tool so that I can do something different. We get more yeses from those people now, rather than you absolutely can't touch my stuff because I don't know you and I have no idea what you're going to do with it. We get more yeses now because there's some trust built up, and there is people get that, and we are there to help and to solve a problem, and that part of that, the benefit, will flow in the direction of the people who've been helping us with data or with infrastructure. That we're not sort of just, oh, this is all about me and something I want to do, but actually, if I do this, I think it will help you as well. So examples being, when we decided to start publishing our spend over £500 data using GitHub, which is free, ICT and digital team immediately saw a benefit, because not only did they not have to manually do extracts and turn it into a particular file format and then publish it on the website, it's also not now sitting on our servers. And going back, I don't know, goodness what, 2 years, actually quite large CSV files. ICT are watching the levels of storage and all of that, our various servers, with the hope that eventually they'll be able to cut 1 or 2 of those out, and more stuff could be stored in the cloud, and more stuff could be stored in stuff like GitHub, which then has no cost to us. So it didn't just help us, it helped them. And also automated a large part of the extract and publish process, because of specific technical tools that GitHub gives. So definitely is about making sure those relationships are strong, and that you have a view to, if I'm doing this thing I want to do, how can I make sure I do it in a way that doesn't add work or grief for the people who I've asked to help me.
So for people who haven't got that relationship, who haven't built up their trust yet, I know you've kind of already said it, but very quickly, what would you summarize as the main tips for getting started to have the luxury that you have of being trusted?
Okay, yeah, so I'm thinking it's been a while. 15 years I've worked at Devon, and getting started, it's very easy to feel isolated, especially if you were in sort of in some vertical and you're in a business area and you're the data person for that business area, or you're kind of pigeonholed and your thing is just performance and you don't really get to talk to the people in the business. It helps, as I said, to sit in on any meetings that are open, so anything that's webcast or anything where everyone is welcome, it's not a secret closed meeting. It helps to sit in the back of those and to learn who people are, who key people are. If you are a data person and you're specifically, as I say, at the bottom of this vertical working in one business area, make a point of finding out who the other data people are, because that's how you'll find out what other data there is and what other stuff is done with data. And that was the one thing that I did. My first role at the council was in a satellite office a couple of miles from County Hall. And we had literally one service in that office and I didn't know anybody else. But I found out who other people were who did data for the whole council, Mark Painter, who's now my teammate, being one of them, and made a point of getting to County Hall to talk to Mark and the other people in the team that he was then in and find out what's going on. So make connections with people who do the same sort of job that you do, but in different business areas, and find out who the people are who have an interest in moving stuff onwards. So sitting in the back of committee meetings, sitting in the back of full council, or board meetings if that's allowed, you will find out, not necessarily if it's in the job description, but if specific people say we could do better with data, or some other phrase that roughly means the same. I can't report, you know, head of finance might say, well, I would report, but, you know, we already produce these things for the managers and they don't really look at them, so I'm not certain what else I can do. You know, then that person has an issue with data communication and presentation, and perhaps that is a person you might want to talk to, or you might want to find out who the data person is in finance and say, can I experiment with presenting that differently and support you somehow? It's going to vary from authority to authority, but for me personally, it was linking up with the other data people and finding out about the possibilities that got me started, and kind of emboldened me to then talk to people in different teams in different areas. It definitely helped me to come up with solutions I wouldn't have come up with on my own.
Thanks. So this one's a bit of a tricky one here, from Tim again.
Okay.
So can you suggest any initiatives that the LGA could do at the centre to help other councils improve their understanding, use and value of data?
Okay. Is this a trick question? I'm just wondering
it might be.
if Tim already has initiatives that I should be mentioning. Tim, if that's the case, pop them in the comments and we'll make sure that we give them a shout out. But I know that the Transformation Fund, it sounds simplistic, but throw money at it, yes. Devon got started because we used some Transformation Fund money to pay for specific training, and it was very practical training, ODI training in fact. It was open data in practice, which meant we got hands-on and analysed some data, visualised some data, used some tools we'd never touched before, and published some data. So by the time we actually, by sort of lunchtime on the second day, we were fired up. Like, we can totally do this. I understand all the principles, and look, I've actually done something and published something. So enabling more authorities to have at least not just one individual, because that one person is going to need backup. I think we had about 15 or 20 people did the open data in practice. So have 2, 3 or 4 people so they can back each other up. Do that training. So if that can be funded, or if something, if LGA can deliver. I mean, you guys already deliver training around using LG Inform, which is just fantastic. And that has the same sort of effect, that it emboldens people. They go away like, I actually made something in this training session. I actually did run a report and tailor it to my particular area. I actually did extract a data set and do something with it. So that would be absolutely top of my list. And supporting, sorry, I forget the name of the actual initiative, but the thing that led to all the public toilets data sets being released and that sort of thing. I know that came at quite a cost, a resource cost, and it was hard work for the LGA, and it was a steep learning curve for a lot of the authorities. Nevertheless, it was incredibly useful, I think, to have that very intensive support around a particular topic. And I know from talking to LGA team that there was a lot of learning on their part as well, that they really valued the stuff that they discovered and that they got from that exercise. So.
Just a comment saying very few budget holders seem to be prepared to fund data projects at the moment, especially open data projects. Does that match up to what you've seen?
Yeah, open data incentive scheme, there you go. Thank you, Tim, that's what it was called, the toilet mapping thing. Sorry, so back to that question. Yes, people, this is not, I think, restricted to open data and data projects. If you say, you know, I have this idea and I think it is beneficial and it will help everybody, then quite reasonably, somebody like the head of education will say, well, then why am I paying for it? Yeah, if this is going to benefit the whole council, then why is it coming out of my budget? And that's a perfectly reasonable response. So it kind of needs to be better use of data. Although you can have pilot projects and prototypes happening in different areas of the business, and someone can take a punt with a small bit of budget or some free tools, like I said, we do a lot. It does feel like this is an overarching whole council strategic thing. It should be regarded the same as having good, robust ICT infrastructure and equipment. It should be the same as having strong policies around information security, strong policies around sort of HR leave, maternity leave treatment of your fellow man, and so on and so forth. It should be a thing that everybody benefits from, everybody gets to take advantage of, and everybody has an interest in supporting. So it feels like this is something that, although it doesn't belong to ICT, it should be looked at and funded in that same way. It's essential infrastructure that everybody benefits from, or it's essential processes and mechanisms that everybody needs to follow, so that then everybody benefits.
So we just got a comment from Emma Nichols, who said the Open Data Incentive Scheme really helped her and her council with getting managers on board and also getting her own knowledge up to speed.
Yes.
Just good. And talking about knowledge, I think we should have to leave it there in order to observe the 1 minute silence
yes.
in a little bit of time. So the ODI, actually the ODI, it's mostly me. The ODI are currently doing training needs analysis of people in government across the world to look at their data training and open data training needs. So we have a survey which we'll send out after this webinar, after this afternoon's webinar, with all the links and things we've talked about. If you could fill it in, that would be very much appreciated. And there's a statement there saying about how the data will be used. And if you would like us to, or if you give us permission, we'll also publish your responses, de-identified responses, anonymously and openly, and then we'll make that open for anyone across the world to see that data. So that might also help to look at some training needs that are required. But obviously we need to collect the data first.
Yes. So yeah, that would be very useful to say, you know, there's a need for this training, and perhaps there can be some sort of joint effort to get that funded and delivered. I think that would be extremely good.
Yeah, we have just got one last question. Okay, last question.
Okay.
So Emma, this is a question for you. What got the managers on board as part of the incentive scheme? Was it the minimal funding available, or wider potential of creating national access to local data? And I guess we'll just wrap up, and hopefully Emma gets back before the end.
Yes, absolutely. Emma, feel free to weigh in and comment. Obviously, we've got the email addresses that you can get back to Tim. I think transparency@local.gov.uk will reach him if we shut down this, and you go, there we go, she's commented back. So thank you everybody very much for joining this webinar. I hope it was useful. If you have questions for me that I didn't cover, then email training@theodi.org or transparency@local.gov.uk, and those will reach me. Happy to talk outside of the webinar. And yeah, thank you very much, everybody.
And also the LGA would like to know any feedback that you do have, so please do get in contact with them with any thoughts that you have. Cool.
Okay, wonderful. There we go.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.